Hi and good morning. Welcome to another class on English for banking. So today we will be starting with reading comprehension. Before that, as always, we will be starting with an introductory session on a book that I would like to recommend to you guys. Okay, so let's get started on today's recommendation. It's a series of short stories by one of the most engaging storytellers of our times. Okay, so today we will be discussing short stories by Jeffrey Archer. Okay, so A Twist in the Tale is a collection of short stories by Jeffrey Archer, Lord Jeffrey Archer, although after his prison stint and his brush with the law, he is not a lord anymore, I guess. Nevertheless, he is a great writer, so we'll give him credit for that and forget the unsavory bits about Lord Jeffrey Archer's life. Okay. So, what is very important about a short story collection is this. Not many people actually have the patience to read a novel or an entire book end to end. How many of you have actually read a book cover to cover? One book. Okay. The answer, unfortunately, is not many. Okay. So I've resigned to the fact that not many read. That's pretty unfortunate, as I said, because unless you read, you never really get exposed to the world outside. Okay. Now you may see things, you may observe things, you can go to every nook and corner of the world, but what comes out as an expression when people write and it gets published, it is critically acclaimed, and then you get to read it. Okay, so that is something unparalleled. Okay, so most of our narrow minds vanish the moment we start reading. Read from every other culture possible, read from every other nation. Okay, so when I read Adichie, I was very surprised that Nigeria was a lot like India, and what she went through as a student in the US was something that every Indian student would again go through anywhere in the world. Okay, so the homesickness, everything. Now with English writers, England-born writers, okay, of course, okay, the UK-born writers, there is a certain familiarity that Indians have, okay, because of our history of colonialism. We are very familiar, we kind of grew up with English, proper English writers, okay, so even our non-detailed texts were from proper British writers, and what colonial era left us behind? English writers, for example, Ruskin Bond, okay, so they are a part of a very elite league of English Indian writers, okay. So without further ado, let's get started on Jeffrey Archer's A Twist in the Tale. As I said, it's a collection of brilliant short stories. Every story has a single twist that changes the entire setting of the story in a line or two. Okay, so that is why it's named A Twist in the Tale. Okay, so these are my favorite stories from this particular collection. The Perfect Murder, okay, where someone murders his mistress and is made to sit on the jury for that trial. Okay, then there is A Clean Sweep Ignatius. This is about a very righteous finance minister in a very corrupt state. Okay, and then there is Christina Rosenthal, which is a very brilliant and touching emotional story. Read all of this. It will probably take you less than half an hour to finish each story. So if you have never read a book in your life, this is a very good start. Okay, you can actually stop with one story, resume after some time, but I doubt you can put this book down. Okay, and Lord Jeffrey Archer is one of the most brilliant users of the English fictional language today. Okay, so give it a shot. All right, we move on to the class. We'll have a quick recap of the previous class. 1, modifiers. We did modifiers. What's a modifier? It's anything, an adjective, an adverb, a phrase or a clause that modifies, gives additional information about something else. That's a modifier. Now, what is to be remembered here is without the modifier, the sentence still holds good. Grammatically correct, essentially, it is perfect. Okay, so you're just adding some information with the modifier. Okay, so with modifiers, we learned how not to put modifiers in the wrong places. Am I right? Misplaced or dangling modifiers. Then we did comparison. Whenever you compare two entities, remember that they have to be similar, comparable entities. You cannot, absolutely cannot compare apples and oranges. Parallelism, when you frame a sentence, it has to be in parallel structure. Okay? So, any doubts with the previous class? Now, we'll go to the CPP question that most of you committed mistakes with. Now again, this is a vocabulary question. Fidelity. What's the meaning of the word fidelity? Now, FIDE is the root word for trust. What are the words that you can make from this? One, of course, is fidelity. The answer, of course, is trust. Okay. Now, another word that means the same is, or a root word that has the same meaning is cred. Okay. Now, when you talk about credit worthiness, okay, it has to do with fidelity. It is not exactly fidelity. Okay. When you talk about credit worthiness, it means that you can trust someone enough to give him some loan. So it is an extended meaning of the word credit or trust. Okay. So you cannot exactly put these two as credit, these two as synonyms. Okay. The exact synonym would be trust. Now, coming back to the root words, from FIDE you get fidelity, of course, which means trust. Then there is bona fide, okay, which means in good faith. Okay, in good faith, I certify this student to be a valid student of our institution. You get a bona fide certificate. Okay, so fidelity is trust. Now coming to cred. From cred you get credit, of course. When would you offer someone a loan? Only when you trust them enough to repay the loan, correct? So there is credit. Then there is credible. And then there is incredible. Okay, credible is believable, incredible is unbelievable. What is belief? Faith, trust again. Okay, what can be believed? Credible. I've heard from credible sources that the state CM is very unwell, critically ill, and he can go from bad to worse anytime now. Okay, so credible versus incredible. It's incredible that he has revived, he has recovered from his serious illness and is back on the CM's chair. Then there is credulous. Okay, so when someone is credulous, it means that he can trust anyone, anything altogether. Okay, so that is credulous. Any other words that have to do with cred or FIDE, you can always let me know. Now the opposite of bona fide is mollified. Okay, all right, so now we look at tenacity. Tenacity, very persistent, hard-working, and willed, hard-willed, strong-willed towards success. Authority is something that you would already know, so I'm letting go of this. So the answer here is trust. Now we come to reading comprehension. Now this is a make or break question for quite a few students. Okay, why is that the case? Because they aren't readers. Okay, so I'll give you a very quick introduction on what to expect from RC questions. Number one, you are given a passage, okay, and then you're asked questions based on information given in the passage. Okay, now remember that when you are given an RC passage, let's say you are a microbiologist and coincidentally the passage given to you in the examination has to do with microbiology. Now you may not concur with whatever the author says. You probably call yourself a better microbiologist than the author himself, but you cannot use outside information, okay, anything that is extraneous to the passage information in order to answer these questions. Now, you may use your common sense, not me, you should use your common sense, your inference skills, your reading ability, okay, to infer what is given in the passage or to extend your reasoning and come up with what can be said from the passage, but you may not use outside information in order to answer any of these questions. Okay, this is rule number one in RC. Okay, the universe is what is given in that particular passage, nothing else, absolutely nothing else. Okay, now one more thing is, almost always you will have passages for the IBPS examinations from banking, commerce, economy, governance, policy making, etc. Okay, so these are typically your topics. Obviously it makes sense, it's a banking examination. If you clear this, you go work in a bank. Okay, so it makes sense for them to include these topics. Okay, so I understand that this doesn't really come under the purview of our general reading topics. Okay, now you would ideally, when I say read, you would ideally look at everyday headlines, your news, and typically stuff like you know, whatever gets you, typically whatever is fun. Okay, so when I open a newspaper, I look at the headlines, that's the you know, main page, and then I move to the crossword. Then I might look at you know, local news. Okay, fine, so what's happening in Bangalore today? Okay, so that might not be exactly, you know, something of national importance. Okay, it is important to me because I need to know some things that are happening locally. Okay, so remember that starting today, you'll have to familiarize yourself with news articles in these spheres of life. Okay, so unless you familiarize yourself with these topics, it's very tough for you to gain an interest, you know, engage yourself in that passage, read, process the information, register that, and then answer questions. Okay, now most of these passages are taken from reputed sources. Okay, now when I say read on this, I don't mean to say that you read WhatsApp forwards or you know, any articles from unreliable sources. Okay, so I'll also give you a few recommendations on where to read what from. Okay, so you can stick to very good reputed newspapers, okay, and their portals. The Hindu for one, The Economist, I'll write them down for you, and then subscribe to The Economist. You can read Wall Street Journal, okay, then there is Business Standard. As an aspiring banker, you should typically be reading these publications. Okay, so that is one, and these are very quality publications. Your language is definitely bound to improve if you do read from these publications. Okay. Next, we go to types of questions. Now, when we have seen, the pattern of questions emerging from the IBPS papers, we see that quite a few times the question types repeat. Okay, so let's look at question types, and let's look at question types a little while later, by the way. What gets you to, have an edge when it comes to reading comprehension? Now, I told you that you need to read on specific topics, correct? Not always can you actually read on just banking, economy, commerce, correct? So you'll have to branch out and call yourself a reader and do justice to that. So regular reading is very, very, very important. Read out of your comfort zone. If you're someone who reads only sports news, okay, or political news, remember that that's not all. Read something that you are completely unfamiliar with, okay, and try to process that information. That is very important, okay. So this is the general tip. Now coming to your examination or your practice questions, what do you read? What do you do when you encounter a passage from which questions are being asked? Number one, you read, and then you should be in a position to summarize. Tell yourself, okay, I read this passage, this is what the passage tells me. In your own words, you should be able to summarize. Then you should be in a position to pick out what is important from the passage. You know, that is something that comes very naturally when you start reading, okay. So there are extraneous information points, then there is the crux of the passage. So you need to identify what is important. Then when you're looking at a passage that provides 2 or 3 arguments, you need to be in a position to identify arguments and the bolstering, supporting evidence or statements, okay. Then this is very, very, very important, because this is where most of your questions are typically from. Number one, what is the author's opinion? Okay, so I might be a left liberal person and you might be a right extremist. Okay, so when I give you a passage, when I write something, you need to understand what my opinion is, okay, and base the answers based on my opinion and not your views, okay. So you need to differentiate between author's opinion and your opinion, okay. Then the author's tone, it could be critical. Let's say I'm very unhappy with the government's stance on something, okay, then I'm critical about the government. I'm telling you, hey, you know what, these guys did these wrong, and this is why I feel this is wrong. I'm being critical of whatever is happening, okay. So the tone is critique. That is very important. Very importantly, the conclusion, okay. Sometimes the conclusion is more important than the introduction, because I conclude with what I feel I'm trying to say, okay. So it's very potent, and you need to absolutely you need to understand what the conclusion is all about, okay. So when you are looking at a passage, how do you read a passage? It's not like, I just skim through the passage at once and then I go to the questions. No, that's not the way forward, okay. So number one, you need to understand the topic, okay. Now there are cases where, for example, there is a passage on reverse discrimination, okay. You might have absolutely no idea about the topic, okay. There is no prior information in your head, no exposure to the topic, but whatever is given in that passage, that is going to be your start and end point, okay. Now you need to understand the topic, So as I told you, we've given you a list of topics that are typically used in banking examinations. Okay, so remember that 1/3 of your questions are from RC passages. Okay, so you better invest the time to read and get ready for this topic. Narrow down on the topics that I've suggested. That's not the start and end of it, of course, but focus there. Then read what is important. How do you figure out what is important in a passage? Now, what is the typical structure of a passage? There is a definite introduction. Okay, then see the introductory passage has a start and an end. The start of the passage and start of the paragraph and the end of the first paragraph, the introductory paragraph, are very important. Okay, then the author says supporting points, then he concludes. Okay, so it's logical, it's common sense to read the first and the last paragraph very well. You can skim through this. Why do I say, I mean, it's very easy for me to say, you know what, read every single line, every single word, take in the import of every single word, go on, only then you can go to the questions. Why do I not say that? Because the time that you have is very, very, very limited, extremely limited. Okay, so you have a very limited time within which you have to read a passage and answer 10 questions based on that passage. As far as we have seen, there is one passage and you get 10 questions, and several times 4 out of these 10 questions are pure vocabulary questions. Okay, so what would a smart person do here? Hazard a guess. Four out of 10 are pure vocabulary questions. If it's pure vocabulary questions, and remember that in the passage, these 4 words, wherever they occur, are in bold, what do I do? Now, I might just know the meanings of these words, okay, even without reading the passage. Okay, so what I do is quickly I mark the answers for these 4. Okay, so if it's a pure vocabulary question, I probably take less than say 1.5 to 2 minutes to do these 4 questions. Done, move. Okay, so even if you are pressed for time, even if you do not have time to read the entire passage, that's your scope to score 4 on 10. Okay, that's not bad at all, right? Now, if I don't understand the meaning, if I've never heard of that word, what do? I read that particular sentence, I try to puzzle it out, and I mark the answer. More often than not, if you try to use your common sense, logical ability, you will be able to puzzle out the meaning of a given word if it's used in sentence form. Okay, we've seen quite a few examples of that. Okay, so that is very important. Now move on to read what is important. As I said, the introduction is important, the conclusion is also important. Then I'll give you a set of markers. You need to read wherever it says first, second, third, and then last, because these are reasons or arguments that the author gives to support something or go against something. Okay, so whenever you see these words, read all of that. Okay, now whatever occurs within braces. Now remember, it's additional information, so you might think that, you know what, it's just additional information, why would I go through that? Now if it's an additional information, from my perspective, okay, I feel that the additional information is there in the first place to make you understand something better. Okay, so it might be an example. I always understand better from examples. Okay, so if you read what is given as an example or as an additional information, you might have a better idea about the main concept. Okay, so I would suggest that you read whatever is given within braces. Third, whenever you see a person's name, okay, for example, you say the then Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao, okay, stated that blah 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 blah. All right. So in this case, the moment I see P.V. Narasimha Rao, a person's name, I read what he says, his opinion on things. Then, let's say, it branches out to say the finance minister in P.V. Narasimha Rao's tenure went against blah 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 blah. Okay, so that again is very important. So remember, whenever you see a person's name, whatever follows as his opinion, as his statement, that is very important. Okay, so whatever is, whatever that I have marked as important, please remember to read in such a fashion that you focus on these details. Any problem here? So quick summary of what is important. Number one, the introduction. The start of the introduction, the end of the introduction. 2, conclusion. Start of the concluding paragraph, end of the concluding paragraph. Okay. Now whatever is in between, wherever you see reasons, arguments listed, first, second, third. First, I don't really approve of ABC's financial decisions during his tenure as blah blah. Okay. Second, the political conditions during this times were turbulent. Lastly, blah blah blah. Okay. So remember, when these words are used, the author is stating his reasons, his arguments. That's the crux of the entire conclusion. That's the basis of the entire conclusion. Correct? So that's important. Then, whenever you see a person's name, okay, what he says on the topic, what someone else says on the topic, that is also important. Then, understand the conclusion. Okay. Now, whenever I say understand the conclusion, it's not just, okay, I read it, done. No, that's not the case. You need to, pull everything together. Okay. Whatever is the argument presented in favor, against, okay, whoever has an opinion, whatever is stated as opinions, whatever is stated as arguments, pull everything together and relate that to the conclusion. Understand why the author is concluding his way, right? Then you are at a better position to, encounter the questions. Try making mental notes. Okay. Now, it never really works when you try to, what do you call? Take notes. No one has that kind of time. You cannot write. Okay, please don't even bother doing that. Don't even attempt doing that. That's not going to work. Your time management will go for a toss. Okay, so try making mental notes. Okay, so whenever you read, whatever you've identified as important, make mental notes. Okay, then this happens very, very, very often. More often than not, I read a passage, I feel that I don't understand what the author is trying to say. I don't stop there, I don't reread, I do not go back and read what he has to say. Now remember, this is not a book that I'm trying to read, it's not something that I read for pleasure. It is something that I read so that I can answer questions that follow, so that I get a good score, so that I clear the sectional cutoff, move on to the next phase of the examination and make sure I clear this examination, correct? Okay, so do not stop in between, keep going back. This back and forth reading will never help you. It will again play havoc with your time management, okay? So whenever you're stuck, move on. For all that you know, that part of the passage might not be tested. There might not be a question from the confusing part. It's okay. All right. So move on even if you're confused. For all that you know, when you finish the passage, you might understand what was initially said. Okay, so this is how you read a passage. Okay, now reading for pleasure is very different from reading for this particular purpose. Okay, that being said, regular readers always have it easy with reading passages. Okay, number one, when I take a book, I know, for example, the book that I suggested today, A Twist in the Tale, I can finish all the short stories in one day. I am pretty sure of that. Okay. Remember that this comes from years and years and years of reading. Okay, I probably picked my first book 25 years back. Okay, so unless you are an avid reader, picking up pace in reading it doesn't come naturally. Okay, so if you aren't a reader today, please start today. Tomorrow you will be a better reader than what you were yesterday. Okay, so pick up a book, start reading. Readers always have an edge. They read fast, they process information better, they register the information better. Okay, then okay, next we come to types of questions. Okay, now you would have questions based on the main idea of the passage. Hey, what exactly is the passage about? Okay, how can this be framed? What would be a possible title for the passage? That is one. Okay, then you can have questions on what is the main idea of the passage. Okay, what is the theme, central theme, main theme of the passage? Okay, or what is the author trying to say? Okay, main idea, main theme, or what can be a possible title to this passage? That would be your possible question frame. Supporting idea. Okay, why does the author say this? So this is a data matching point. Okay, so you pick something from the passage and say, hey, this is why he says this. Okay, for the question frame typically would be, which of the following statements factors in the author's opinion on this process? Okay, inference, you make use of what is given in the passage, you infer something else. A plus B gives something else. Tone and style, this is to do with the author's opinion. Tone, as I said, it could be critique, it could be satire, sarcasm, okay, appreciation, literary appreciation. Okay, so tone and style are to do with the style of writing. Passage structure. Okay, passage structure is all about why is this particular part in this passage, what purpose does it solve? Application, using the information, you're asked a question. Okay, so this is application. You apply the same concept somewhere else, give the answer. Logical reasoning, for this of course you need some common sense. Then, as I said, 4 out of 10 questions typically are from vocabulary. Okay, pure vocabulary. What does this word mean? This is your easiest pick of the lot. Within 2 minutes, 1.5 to 2 minutes, you can gain 4 marks. Okay. Then we come to the previous class contest question. Find the odd one out. Now, stoic, indifferent, apathetic, nonchalant, they all mean the same. Indifferent, not very caring. I don't really have an opinion on things. I am very indifferent. I do not have a special place for anything. Okay, so these are all the same. Benevolent, on the other hand, is the opposite. It means very caring, gentle, kind, etc. Okay, so I think Gurunath got it right yesterday. So good job, Gurunath. You win an atom session with HashLearn. Okay, congratulations. We move to today's contest question. Good luck. I hope you had a good run with the contest question. Now let's look at a very simple RC passage. Because I've given you so many theoretical tips, okay, I've chosen a very easy passage for you, okay. Now what you would see in your IBPS is probably 10 or 15 times tougher than this, remember. But I picked up this passage, by the way, it has nothing to do with banking. It's just that I picked this passage so that you have a fair idea of how to read a passage, okay, and it is something that you can also, you know, understand without much, effort from your side, okay. So let's look at this passage. It's a very small passage in the first place. The dolphin has, since ancient times, had the reputation of being the friendliest creatures in the sea. Roman time stories recount stories of dolphins helping drowning sailors, okay. So what is the introduction? It's about dolphins being friendly. That is all I register from this. So I'll underline that for you. Dolphin, friendly. Done, okay. That is what is important in the introductory passage. Studies on dolphins tell us that their society is more complex than what people had previously imagined. So it is some scientific study that studies dolphin behavior, their societal structures. That's what I register here. They look after other dolphins in times of sickness, care for pregnant mothers, and protect the weakest in the community, as we do. The as we do here again is very important. So you mirror, you kind of compare human society with dolphin society and say, you know what, this is what we do, this is exactly what they do. Comparison arguments, okay. Then some scientists, now when I say some scientists suggest, now remember, when there is a proper noun, whatever they say become important. In this case, some scientists suggest, this again is an argument, okay. So even though there is not a proper noun in place here, this is very important, whatever comes after. Dolphins have a language, but it is much more probable that they communicate with each other without words. So forget everything. What I understand is they might have a language. Two, they might not have a language, but they communicate with each other, okay. Could these mammals be more intelligent than man? One of the most common arguments in favor of man's superiority over them, that man can kill them easily than they can kill us, is the least satisfactory. So this is important because it says it's a common argument. I told you identifying arguments is very important, okay. So whatever this is, I have this in mind. So what is the argument? Hey, you know what? A man can kill a dolphin easier than a dolphin can kill a man. That's the import of this sentence. On the contrary, this again is important. I told you, right? First, second, third, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So this is also somewhere there. On the contrary, you have one opinion, state something else that goes against this opinion. Okay. The more we discover about these remarkable creatures, the less we appear superior when we destroy them. This is a conclusion. Okay. So this is it. Now, one more thing is IBPS RC questions. The passages will have such bold questions, bold words. Okay. Remember that this has been the case till date. You never know. Things might change in the next exam. Nevertheless, it makes sense for us to study what has been happening. You know, it's not exactly predictive, but it makes sense to study previous formats. Now look at the questions. Which of the following statements finds support in the passage? Okay. Now from whatever I've read, let me discuss these options. Dolphins avoid us as much as we would like to avoid them. I haven't read this in the passage at all. Eliminate. It's a data matching question. Dolphins are less intelligent than once thought. No, it says they are intelligent. Okay. So this again is erroneous. Dolphins have a reputation for being friendly with humans. This is the first, the introductory paragraph states this. So this is a contender, but I'm not marking that as the right answer now. Let's also look at the other options. Eliminate, if necessary, come back. Dolphins are the apex predators in the oceans. Nothing about that is said in the passage. As I said, the universe for these questions is the passage. Whatever information is given, that is all there is to consider. Now, you might be a marine biologist and say, you know what, dolphins are the apex predators in the oceans. They can kill sharks, they can, they are friendly with whales. No, that's not the case. No one cares about what you know already. They might be apex predators, they might not be apex predators of the oceans. Okay, remember, it is not stated in the passage. I'm eliminating that. Out of scope, out of mind. Dolphins are capable of learning a language and communicating with humans. Now this is confusing, okay? You say that the passage says that they might have a language, they communicate. But with humans, you're extending the scope. That's not the case. They communicate within themselves. That is what is stated in the passage. The with humans part does not make sense. So this is also eliminated. I go with option C. Any problem here? Now, the fact that the writer of the passage thinks we can kill dolphins more easily than they can kill us. Okay, this is the conclusion, remember, means that they are better adapted to their environment than we are. Nothing is said about the environment. Okay, so this was discussed when the author was talking about the argument about their intelligence, their comparative intelligence with humans, correct? Shows that dolphins have a very sophisticated form of communication. Does this have anything to do with killing us? No. Prove that dolphins are not the most intelligent species at sea. Okay. Now, this could be a contender because you do talk about this in, when it comes to intelligence, comparative intelligence. Does not mean we are superior to them. Yes, this is exactly what he concludes. He says, look at this. The more we discover about these remarkable creatures, the less we appear superior when we destroy them. One of the most common arguments in favor of man's superiority over dolphins is that man can kill dolphins easily, they cannot kill us, is the least satisfactory. Okay, that reason is least satisfactory. What does that mean? It does not mean that we are superior to them. Okay, so this is a very strong contender. E, proves that dolphins have linguistic skills far beyond what we previously thought. This is stated in the passage, but this has nothing to do with this. So D is your answer. One can infer, whenever the question is on infer, remember you need to make use of what is given in the passage to come up with this inference. Okay, now look at A, dolphins are quite abundant in some areas of the world. There is absolutely no information on their numbers. Eliminate. Communication is the most fascinating aspect of the dolphins. Now he says communication, dolphin communication is, something that has been observed. Is it most fascinating? We don't know. We'll come back to that. Okay, so this might be a contender, but I'll put that on hold. Dolphins have skills that no other living creatures have, such as the ability to think. Okay, so the passage talks about dolphins. It does not talk about anything else. It does not talk about comparing intelligence of dolphins with that of others. So I'm quite skeptical about this as well. It is not usual for dolphins to communicate with each other. I'll eliminate this because the passage clearly states dolphins communicate with each other. Dolphins have some social traits that are similar to those of humans. Yes. Now go back to the passage. Look at this. Studies on dolphins tells that their society is more complex than what was previously imagined. Okay, dolphins do this, as we do. Okay, so you can infer that they have social behavior that is similar to that of humans. This is the right answer. Okay. Now, what is the most synonymous among these with common? Common is something that you know about. There is absolutely, I doubt people around would have an issue knowing what common is. The meaning of common is very common. Okay, pun intended. Okay, now look at this. All of these, on the other hand, are a little tough. Mundane, pedestrian, banal, platitudinous. You might not have heard about any of this, but all of these are synonymous with common. So all of the above is your answer. This is a pure vocabulary question. Okay. So quick summary. We did RC introduction. We did an exercise question. Thank you for joining us. So passport members, please go ahead, do your CPP. Your CPP today obviously is an RC question with 10 questions. The CPP is a set of 10 questions that is open only to passport members. It is something that we put together with much thought. Okay, so go ahead, do it. Great luck. Thank you. Bye.